Are you ready to learn? Because my super experienced guests are ready to share some really valuable information. Make sure and listen all the way to the end to get help and support. So let's start with the best audio experience.
Hello guys, welcome to our show. Today we discuss about JS, JavaScript, frameworks, and we are going to touch the topic, the fall and rise of JS. So I'm so excited to discuss this topic with Chris Ferdinandi. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, we chatted a little bit. I think that, each day is good. Each moment is awesome if you set up the positive mindset. So just cheat your mind, even if it's not right, because if you cheat it, you can feel much happy and go ahead. So before we start, just tell more about yourself, experience, background, and why you decided to share with us about JS frameworks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey everyone, my name is Chris Ferdinandi. I help people learn JavaScript, and I believe that there's a simpler, more resilient way to make things for the web. So a big part of what I do is help early career developers, people who are looking to move into development from other fields, get started. And one of the big things I hear from them a lot, and one of the things that really drives me to do the work I do, is kind of this idea that this work has gotten a lot more complicated than it used to be. I think sometimes that actually kind of hurts the web in the long run, and so I spend a lot of my time trying to teach people ways that we can build things that are easier to build, easier to maintain, are going to stick around for a lot longer. And for those of you who are trying to maintain or run businesses, also help your business be more successful, not crash, not go down at those critical times when you need it not to. A big part of what I do is every day I have a newsletter that goes out sharing a development tip, trick, interesting thing I found from on the web. If anybody's interested in that or other topics that we're going to talk about, they can find out more at gomakethings.com/unmiss. I've put together a special collection of resources for viewers of this stream.
Yeah, nice, guys. You can find all these links in the description below on Apple, Spotify, Google, on my website, on my social media. So yeah, okay, let's start from the basic. Can you tell about JS frameworks? How to choose the right one? Because I know that we have some popular frameworks like Vue, React, and many others, and we have some unrecognizable, but probably with their advantages. Can you tell how to choose the right one and some basic information for someone who is not familiar, including me, about JS? Just tell what is it and how to choose the right one.
Yeah, it's a broad question. So let me just take a step back for a second. So I think there's this perception that you, if you're building something for the web, you absolutely need a framework. And that is very much not true. I'd actually argue that a lot of times you don't even need JavaScript. So if you look at the kind of the three parts of what makes a website, HTML is what gives it kind of the structure and kind of defines what different pieces of the page are. So like an H1 element or an H2 element, those are headings, that denote this is the start of a section of stuff. Buttons are obviously buttons, and links are links that take you to places. CSS is the stuff that gives it an appearance. So if you didn't have any CSS, you would just have like a wall of text. You can make it look pretty. And you can also do some pretty cool stuff with CSS. And then JavaScript has historically been the part of that stack that gives your website interactivity. So user does a thing, the website does something back in response. And a lot of what we build, even if you're building something like an e-commerce site, does not need much JavaScript to function. Technically, you can build an e-commerce site without any JavaScript at all. They sometimes work a little bit nicer if they have some. Where JavaScript really shines is when you want your website to react to things that the user does without having to reload the entire page. So, a good example of this, I'll keep harping on e-commerce sites just for a minute. But so, you have a page with a bunch of products. Someone hits add to cart. I'm glad I'm not the only one who's going to have a dog that might yip in the background. Mine is very chatty. So the old school way to do that would be someone clicks the button, the entire page reloads, something happens on the server, and then you get back this page that has, your little cart icon in the corner with the new number of items. With JavaScript, you could do something like you click that button, it runs some process in the background while the web page stays exactly the way it is, and then just updates that one little piece of the page for you. So where JavaScript frameworks become handy is if you have a large page with a lot of moving parts, rather than having to target all of these different elements and make all these small updates, libraries allow you to say, if my data that defines how the page should looks like this, do this thing. If it looks, oh my God, you have multiple dogs. They're so cute.
Yeah.
If it looks like that, do this instead. And so, imagine you have a situation where you've got you've got your checkout page and you've got like half a dozen items in someone's cart, and someone clicks to remove an item or update a quantity. There's a few different things on that page you're going to want to update in response. The number of items displayed in the cart icon in the corner. You're going to want to remove that row from the table. Let's imagine they end up emptying their entire cart. Now you need to display some completely different message that says you have no items in your cart. Like click here to go, shop for stuff. And libraries allow you to not have to say, okay, if this, do this, look for this element. If it's there, do this. If not, do this other thing. And instead you just say, if they have items in their cart, display them like this. If they don't, display this message instead. And then the library just figures out all the other stuff for you. And that can be really, really nice. So just at a very high level, that's kind of when I start to reach for a library of any kind, is when I'm making more than just a couple of updates based on some sort of like data or like state is the buzzword for this of the page. E-commerce platforms are a really nice way to describe this, because you might have like an object of cart item, items in your cart. Like I've got these 5 items and quantities and some data that goes along with it. So I will pause for a sec because I have more to ramble about this, but if you have any questions or any reactions to anything I've said, I'd like to shut up or I'll just go forever.
Yeah, can you tell how to choose the right framework? Because on Google I can find the popular ones, a lot of reviews, but what about unrecognizable that probably have their advantages? Just tell more about choosing. Yeah,
so the question then becomes, obviously, as you said, so you've decided it's time to use one. Which one do you pick? It depends. So there's a few different things to consider. So one question is, are you using some sort of existing platform already? Do they have something already baked in or like a preference? So just as an example, WordPress already has React baked in because they use it on the back end now for the user or the administrative dashboard. So if you were going to build some sort of interactive front end on the WordPress platform, it might make sense to just grab React because it's already kind of baked in. Are you looking to use some other developers to help you? Do they have experience with one tool over another? So, that kind of context is one consideration. Another one, if you're planning to do it yourself, is just which one do you find easier to wrap your head around? Vue and React approach building user interfaces very differently. And for some people, one mental model clicks better than the other. And it's not React is always easier or Vue is always easier. It just really varies by the person and how they learn and how they think about kind of data and interfaces. And I am a big fan of using the tool that helps you go from I have an idea to I've built a thing as quickly as possible. So there was a time where I was very much like a purist about this. But I think now it's much more important to go from there's this thing I want to build, I've built it, than picking the exact right thing. So that's one aspect of this. But the other piece here is that both React and Vue, they have a lot of code, and that means a lot of places for things to go wrong, a lot of JavaScript that has to be downloaded by the browser and loaded into the website before it can start rendering things into the user interface, and a lot more points where things can break for your users. So if you're someone who is running some sort of business, an e-commerce platform, a shop, a video streaming site, a membership site, whatever it happens to be, the more JavaScript you use, the more chances there are for things to go wrong, and the less resilient the thing that you've built is. There's also a lot of data around web performance and revenue. So just as a general rule, sites that are slower make less money. People are more likely to leave. If it takes too long for certain things to happen on a page, they'll just give up and go somewhere else. And so there's kind of this new suite of tools that have come out in the last year or two that work very similar to how things like Vue and React work, but they do it with less code. So they load faster, they render updates faster. One of the most notable ones is Preact, which if you were going to choose React, I would go with Preact instead because it's about 1/10 the size and renders your UI a lot faster. Evan Yu, the guy who built Vue, also built this other tool called Petite Vue that does some of the stuff that Vue does, but not all of it, and is also like a fraction of the size. So that'd be a really good choice as well, depending. And then, yeah, there's some other kind of alternate tools that are also smaller. And so I know the question was, how do you pick the right one? There is no like cut and dry kind of answer here. The other angle here is I talk to a lot of people who are just looking for work. They maybe they're starting a freelance business and they want to get hired building websites for people, or they want to go work for an agency. If you're doing that, I do have a much more direct answer for this one, and it's learn React. React is probably the market leader right now. I don't think it will be in another 5 years, but it is right now. And that means that if you just want the easiest path into, like I can find job descriptions that have skills that I have, that's probably like your surest bet. But things are changing. So I suspect in another couple of years, we're going to have a very different kind of web environment than we do right now.
Nice. I think that's good for customers, for us, when we have such competition, when we have choices. So yeah, why not? It's better to spend some time. For example, if I choose CMS or any other stuff, I just spend time researching, learning, and think what actually works much better for me. So it depends, as you mentioned. Okay, I asked my audience questions. What kind of questions to ask you, and they asked me which JS framework are good for slow internet. Can you reply to this?
Yeah, so this is actually kind of what I was getting at towards the tail end of my last answer. Really great question. So the best framework for slow internet is no framework at all. If you can avoid using JavaScript or libraries, at least frameworks in your kind of loads into the browser code, you're much better off for it. The reason why is JavaScript is the slowest part of kind of that front end stack of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Just as a scripting language, like for HTML and CSS, the browser will download stuff, and as it's downloading it, it starts rendering the UI. But with JavaScript, it actually doesn't do that. Because JavaScript can change what's on the page, and browsers are lazy and don't want to do any work that they don't have to. When they see JavaScript, they stop downloading all the other files. So like normally they'll download multiple files at once. When they see a JavaScript file, they stop and they wait for that one file to download. Then they have to wait until the whole thing is downloaded, compile it, read through it once just to figure out what it's going to do before they even start running it. And then they'll start rendering. And so if you're on a slow internet connection, that process can really, really, really slow down a page. And so the takeaway there is the less JavaScript you can use, the better. So with that in mind, a tool like Preact or Petite Vue or there's a new competitor on the market, Solid.js. That's going to be better than one of the bigger, more traditional ones like Vue or React or Angular, just by virtue of them being smaller. The other kind of piece of this, and actually kind of I think the meat of what I was hoping we could talk about a little bit today, but obviously viewer questions, happy to go through those first, is that there is a newer set of tools that I'm seeing start to gain popularity that I think is going to replace JavaScript libraries entirely. That rather than sending libraries to the browser, allows you to build websites the way you would with a library, and then you run some sort of compile step that takes that JavaScript and converts it into mostly HTML with just a little bit of JavaScript sprinkled on top. And so the thing that gets shipped to the browser is much, much smaller. So some examples of that include, so if you're looking at legacy technologies, you have things like Next.js that allow you to write React on the server, but they still ship a ton of JavaScript down the line. You have newer tools like Svelte and Astro, which give you a kind of React-like authoring experience, but send stuff that's not React to the browser. Astro in particular is really cool because it allows you to use code from different libraries. So you can take some Vue stuff, some React stuff, some Svelte stuff, put it all together, and it will spit out a mostly HTML website with just like, it'll just pull out the parts that you need, which is really cool. And these things can be a huge performance win. So Jason Lengstorff is a developer over at Netlify. He actually experimented with converting one of his old React sites into an Astro site. He was able to use almost all the code. He just had to make a couple of tweaks. And it ended up reducing the amount of JavaScript by 90%. And the page got it loaded like 30% faster. This is all just a really long-winded way of saying avoid using JavaScript whenever you can, ship as little of it as possible. I really like these newer tools that allow you to write websites the way you'd like, but then they ship mostly HTML to the browser. HTML is always, always, always faster. Actually, hold on, just give me a sec. I just want to pull up this one little data point here if I can find it. So Zach Leatherman, who built he built this static site generator called 11T. He works at Netlify as well, and he is a performance specialist. He did this really wild experiment a couple of years ago where he built a website with a single. So he built two websites. I apologize. One of them was an 8.5 megabyte large HTML file with the full text of every single one of his 27,000 plus tweets in it. And the other one was a React website with just one tweet in it. And he did some performance tests to find out which one would load and render faster. The 8.5 megabyte just HTML site was like perceivably faster, not a whole second. It was like a fraction of a second, but it was enough that you could actually perceive the difference. Even though it was like hundreds of times bigger than the React site, which is one file on it, because JavaScript is that slow. The best framework is not using one at all. The second best framework is a compiler like Astro or Svelte or 11T. And the next best thing after that is something like Preact or Petite Vue.
Yeah, nice, so valuable. Yeah, I got many the same tips. For example, it's better to avoid using WordPress plugins, but sometimes we can't live without them. So it's hard to create the same plugin, for your website. So it depends.
So now, to this point, if you have to, like, if you're in a position where you need to, just for whatever reason, you don't have the skills, or you need, there's this tool that exists that just will make your life a lot easier. This is where I find a tool like Astro.js so interesting, because you can take all of these tools that you love and plug them in, and it'll strip out all the stuff that's not needed and just send along something a lot smaller. It basically removes the the React dependency and allows you to use this tool mostly as is, which is great. Anyways, I'll shut up. I'm sure there are other questions. I'm sorry. Talking is my superpower.
Yeah. We have the question: what are some problems you face working with JS frameworks?
Yeah. There are many. So full disclosure, I'm the vanilla JS guy, so I tend to avoid using frameworks whenever possible.
Okay.
The reason for that, beyond some of the stuff we've already talked about, is I just really hate that building websites today often involves opening some sort of like terminal or command line window and running some stuff before you can actually build. I really like being able to open a text editor and open a browser and just build websites. And so I think for me, some of the biggest problems that I run into when I try to use lots of third-party tools, not just JavaScript frameworks, is bad documentation, kind of running into edge cases where, you have to dig through a bunch of GitHub issues or questions and answers on Stack Overflow or Reddit to try and find someone who's run into the same problem and can fix it. Having to muck around with terminal commands instead of being able to just focus on the thing I love doing, which is writing code. I know I already mentioned this, but it is literally, I think, the biggest problem in development: bad documentation. It's just bad documentation ruins so many things. And I think this is where certain tools tend to really win over others. The libraries that I think end up being most popular are often the ones that have the best documentation. For better or worse, they're not always the best tools. They're just if they're well documented, they're going to win.
Yeah, well done. Okay, it's another broad question. What are the best front-end JS frameworks? Of course, it depends, but.
Yeah. So we, I feel like we kind of already covered this one a little bit with the, how do you choose the right one? But so yeah, the best one is not at all. The second best one, honestly, if I had to pick just one tool to use for the rest of my life when it comes to web development, it would be something like 11D. So 11D is a static site generator. It allows you to take markdown files and take some templates you've created and mash them together. So it works a little bit like WordPress, if anybody has familiarity with that, where you've got your templates and your database and it smushes them together. The difference is that 11D and other tools like it do that mashing together of content and templates ahead of time, so that when someone visits your site, they just instantly get the thing they want back. Whereas a tool like WordPress is building these HTML files in real time whenever they're requested. And so when you cut that process out, you can run your sites on much cheaper hosting, and everything runs a lot more smoothly for end users. But yeah, barring that, probably something like Astro or or Svelte, or if you really truly need client side reactivity, Preact. But it depends. There really is no best. There's just a bunch of tools that approach the same problem in different ways.
Okay, very well. Okay, let's talk about training web developers. I found on your LinkedIn profile that you have some training, you have newsletter. For example, I found from my experience, if I teach my customers how SEO works, we can get much higher results. Because if they don't understand, the best coach, the best mentor can't help to get traffic. But when you understand, it's the same like, I don't know, to lose weight. If you don't know why you need to eat healthy food, train hard, spend time, I don't know, to rest a lot more, and it's hard. The best coach can't teach you why you need to do it. You need to understand. Then you can consider some suggestions and to get results in the long run. It's not simple, but and I use the same approach with my customers. I tell them, okay, just learn the basics of SEO. If you understand the basics, we can create high quality content, we can rank higher on Google, we can provide link building campaigns. But if you find some specialists who just promise without understanding the process, it's hard. It's really hard to get results. Can you give me a strong reason, or for my audience to subscribe to your newsletter, to spend time with your training programs? What kind of benefits we can get compared to others? Just more insights about your training.
Yeah, great question. So you can find all of my stuff, for lack of a better word, over at gomakethings.com. There's a few different angles to the way that I tend to teach people code. So I guess up front, one aspect of this is I have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so that means for me that if I find something really interesting, I can focus on it to the exclusion of everything else, including like eating lunch, going to the bathroom, like I'll just tunnel vision. But if I find something boring, or if there's too much information being thrown at me at once, it's really, really hard to focus and get stuff done. And a lot of that has, I think, influenced the way that I build training programs, teach people things. I tend to focus on really short lessons and then throw you into actually working on a problem, building something, actually like getting hands-on with the code. It's just a bias I have that's helped me kind of learn and helped information stick. And one of the really nice side effects I've found of that is that apparently a lot of other people find that a really great way to learn too. And so it's worked out pretty well. And so my stuff, from my books all the way up to my big immersive workshops, all follow this very similar pattern of learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little, repeat. And it's, just, you mentioned training, Anatoly, and like, eating well and things like that. It's really that same kind of pattern. Like, you wouldn't go and try to deadlift 2 times your body weight the first time out. You'd start with something really small and work your way up. And learning to code is exactly the same way. I think the biggest mistake I see a lot of people make is they go, oh, I want to code a web app. And they just try to jump right into that. And they get stuck, they get frustrated, they quit. So a lot of what I do is focused on, let's start small and let's work our way up. But small doesn't have to mean boring. I also see a lot of training that's like, we're going to learn how JavaScript works under the hood. And it's very like clinical and boring and easy to lose interest. So I just, we'll start with, okay, we're going to build a plugin, something that you can go and use and like throw into a website today. And then we're going to build on it. We'll add more features and we'll change the way it works. So that's kind of the whole thing there. Whether it's my newsletter, which is free to sign up for, or my courses and books, all the way up to my workshop, it's just very kind of hands-on.
Okay, guys, you need to follow Chris. You need to subscribe to this newsletter to learn more about that, because you can see a lot of valuable insights. I have the question about, I often have issue when my customers can't find good web developers. It's hard, for example, if I submit the request on Upwork or any other platforms, I get like many replies. I can do it. Sorry for my dogs.
I'm amazed mine has not been barking. We anytime anyone walks by the house, it's just mayhem.
Yeah, and and for example, if I submit request on Upwork, I can get many replies. I can do it. I check out ratings, reviews, everything is fine, but except results. When you hire them, you get like mediocre, not good job, low quality. I'm not against specialists on Upwork or any other platforms, but it's really hard to choose the right one. It includes any niche. For example, if I'm looking for copywriters, designers, it's hard to find great specialists who can understand the task, who can provide great results. Can you tell from your experience how to do it, how to find the right web developers? Because I found that good web developers are busy. they usually don't. They are not looking for a job because they have a lot of jobs. So tell how to find good web developers.
Yeah, this is the same problem with finding like contractors to work on your home and stuff, right? Like the ones who are available are probably not very good, and like the good ones are too busy to take on the work. Yeah, whenever I've needed kind of specialist help, I tend to ask around. I think it's the same way most people look for kind of skilled professionals. You ask around, ask for referrals. Sometimes that means waiting a little bit. But to be perfectly honest, a big part of the reason why I started learning how to code in the first place was I wanted to build things based on some ideas I had, and I didn't want to like have to wait for or rely on other people to do it. So I started teaching myself to code. Yeah, I think one of the other aspects here is there's a difference between a developer and like I'm trying to think of the right word for the other thing I want to say here, but like a specialist or an expert or a consultant. But like, so there's a lot of people who can write the code that you've told them to write, but you may not necessarily know how to kind of tell them what to do. Like there are people who are really good at just like taking the orders and spitting out what they think you told them to do. Like the code is good, but it may not actually meet the objective you want. And this is where I think finding specialists who are experts in whatever the thing you are trying to do is can make a really big difference. So for example, I'm in a business group with people who specialize in, one of them is helping, working with wedding officiants. So people who, who work in the wedding industry and oversee weddings. And they are really good at building web things for people who work in the wedding industry because they understand that industry really well. And it goes beyond, I can write good code. It's moved into the level of I can solve problems specific to your business. So when you say to me, I need a way to make ordering flowers easier for my customer, their brain doesn't immediately go, you need a React app and you need this kind of, they go into like, okay, what does that process look like for, a couple who's getting married? Okay, here are the kind of questions they're likely to ask. And so here's how we should design the checkout process to answer those questions ahead of time so they pick the right flowers, and the kind of things that would cause them to give up on the transaction won't happen. It's a whole different way of thinking about problems that has nothing to do with technology. Finding those people, that's a different kind of thing. If they're doing their job well, and their SEO is good and they've focused on kind of building that reputation, they should kind of maybe float to the top over some other folks. To be honest, they're typically not on a platform like Upwork or Fiverr. They're usually just kind of doing their own thing, and you're going to want to Google for them. And you're probably going to search for things differently. So rather than I'm looking to build e-commerce, you might be looking for, like wedding specialist or, sneaker e-commerce specialist or something like that. But yeah, it's just, in my opinion, it's a very different way of kind of approaching problems. They also candidly tend to be a lot more expensive than something you're going to find on Fiverr. And I know that's not always, or Upwork. And I know that's not always, affordable for customers at different kind of journeys in their process. Just as a tangent, a lot of folks who do that also have lower end offerings as well. So they might have some kind of just turnkey solutions or do it yourself kind of guides or things like that can be useful as well. I know that wasn't necessarily your direct question, but there is a little bit of a like you get what you pay for kind of aspect here. Like you don't want to hire the cheapest plumber, at least if you value not having water in your home.
I know if you are looking for the cheapest price, you're in trouble. Your project is in trouble, and I know, for example, I usually pay like 3 times more for copywriting compared to Upwork, Fiverr, any other platforms, because good experts will never write tags because of the average price. No, they usually write according to their experience, and it's the same with web development. I know many projects failed because of cooperating with specialists who promise high quality results, but they can't, and the price was the average or lower than the average. So it's better to cooperate with someone who asks more, and you can save your time, you can increase the chance of getting results. Yeah, from my experience, I always prefer to cooperate with experienced specialist with a proven record. So if I can check out their websites, I can see portfolio. Oh, yeah, good job. So I want to cooperate with this specialist. Yeah, from my experience. Okay, I have the question about, let's imagine you started from scratch without any experience, knowledge, skills. What will you do today to learn more about frameworks?
Yeah. So if I was starting just like completely from scratch, I would not touch a framework to start. I've had a lot of students who have like, okay, I want to be a developer. I need to learn React. And they go try to learn React and they're like, I have no idea what to do here. And then they're like, all right, maybe I should like back up and learn some of the essentials. And then they go to learn React like a few months later and they're like, oh, this is a lot easier now that I understand kind of how all these different pieces work. So my first piece of advice, don't try to learn a framework right away. You want to start with kind of those fundamentals, because frameworks are awesome. They can do some really awesome things, but they are really tools that augment what the browser already does and kind of those fundamental technologies. And if you don't understand those, some people don't have this experience. Some people have jumped right into, say, Vue and found it really easy. But a lot of folks find these tools much harder to learn when they don't understand kind of the basics of web development. So I would start with, learning those first. If you don't already know like HTML and CSS, I would start there. If you do, I would start with maybe building some really simple projects in JavaScript. One of my favorites is you've got some content and a button. You click the content, the button gets hidden. You click the button again, it shows up again. It's a really simple kind of thing that gets you into the whole, like, it covers a lot of ground with how to get elements in a UI, how to toggle different things on them, how to handle interactivity. Just like all the basics of DOM manipulation. One of the toughest things I found with learning how to code is there's a lot of options. Anything you want to do, there's usually like a dozen different ways to do it. And when you get stuck, knowing where to turn for help can be really, really difficult. So if you find yourself in this position, I just kind of want to briefly mention vanillajsprojects.com is a collection of self-paced courses I've put together. It's completely free. And each one includes a couple of lessons, a starting template for you, and then a walkthrough of how I approached and solved that problem. So if you get stuck, you can see me go through it and kind of figure that out. And each one builds on the other. So, Anatoly, we talked a few minutes ago about kind of this idea of starting small and working your way up. It's that same kind of thing. So we'll start with a really small project and then we'll layer in some stuff over time. Really great way to get started if you're just kind of digging into this stuff. And then once you've kind of gotten comfortable with some of the basics of, it's called DOM manipulation, but kind of changing things in the UI, then you might jump over to learning a library or a framework. And now, with all that said, I personally think that Vue is, of all of the front-end frameworks, I think it's the easiest one to learn because it is mostly HTML with a little bit of JavaScript sprinkled on top. It's less common in a corporate environment though. And so, if your biggest focus is getting hired to go work somewhere, you might want to dabble with React first. And the React.js website has gotten a lot better at helping you get started from not knowing anything. So they have some really great tutorials over there now. But I would learn the basics first.
Nice. Love it. Good tip. Chris, it's a big pleasure to get you on my show, to learn from you. You share a lot of valuable insights. Tell our audience how they can reach out to you, learn more about you, follow you.
Yeah. So the best way, gomakethings.com. If you go to gomakethings.com/unmiss, I put together a bunch of resources based on stuff that we've talked about here today, articles, videos I've put together, a handful of free ebooks and resources, courses, things like that, as well as a place where you can sign up for my newsletter if you want to learn more. That's kind of my home. Gomakethings.com is my home for all things on the web. So that's probably the best place to start.
Okay, guys, you can find all these links in the description below. Listen to us on Apple, Google, Spotify. Thanks again for your time. A big pleasure. Welcome back anytime to share more valuable insights. I love it, guys. You need to subscribe to newsletter. You need to open this website. You need to learn from Chris because you can see a lot of value. Okay, guys, love you. See you.